don't worry if the camera's not faced towards you if you're shy.
We're all covered anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to. This kirtan is from India,
Okay.
but it's considered very universal. In the ancient literatures, it describes it. It's a very open concept that any name of God, if you sing it, that will be a very effective method to bring your consciousness to be God conscious. That instead of being, Bitcoin conscious, or my bills conscious, or my looks conscious, we can be God conscious. Our mind and our hearts can be absorbed in God, according to the ancient philosophy given in the Vedas. That the most effective practice in this day and age is to sing God's names. And so we'll do a little demonstration, and we'll start our talk and Q&As. And also, if you want to, you're like, hey, wait a minute, just give me I want to know more about this, or you have a question, just you feel free to raise your hand and interrupt. You start us off. Just much fun.
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Rama Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, So, how many of you have heard of this book, the Bhagavad Gita? 1, 2, 3.
You read about it this semester, yes. You read excerpts from it, actually. Yeah.
So Bhagavad Gita is the main spiritual text from ancient India. It's a 5,000-year-old text written in Sanskrit. And Bhagavad is a name for God. Bhaga means that which he who possesses all wealth, all beauty, all fame, all power, all renunciation. Did I miss? This is the sixth one. Did I get them?
You said
I
it.
said them all? Okay. Did I say them all? Everybody has certain attractive qualities, but God is that being that has He has everything in full. And Van means the possessor of. So Bhagavad and Gita means song. So why is it called a song? Because every single Sanskrit verse is written with a beautiful rhythm and nice meter. It's quite beautiful. And then, so in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, there's a chapter called the opulences of God, the opulences of the Supreme. And it describes different excellences in this world that we can see. And so one of them he says is Vada Pravadantam Aham. And that means Vada is a term that's used in logic, in debate. In India they had these ancient tradition of debate. For example, if I'm a teacher and he's a teacher, and I lose a debate to him, I have to become his student. If I can't get some backup, then I have to become his student. That's how rigid the system of debate was. And there are different kinds of arguments that you have in debate. And one of them is called jalpana. Another one is called, forget the term. There's different Sanskrit terms. But they're basically like we have argumentative fallacies. Mm-hmm. But vada means when both parties just want to understand what is true. And so Krishna says, when dialogue like that, when both parties just want to understand what is the truth, that's a representative of divinity. That's an excellence of my own power. And so we encourage you as through the Bhagavad Gita that it's a philosophical tradition, so don't feel shy to say, hey man, I see a big hole right here that doesn't seem to make sense. Don't be shy to dig into something that we may say. And just, it's not going to be that we're going to be crying, or it's very philosophical. So go for it. Have at us. As long as we're respectful and we're trying to understand the truth, that we're both just want to know the truth, then he says, that's me. That's a representative of my energy. So first thing I'd like to cover is I have a multiple choice question for you. Now, how many...
It's a warm-up for the exam.
Warm-up for the exam. Yeah. So what's your name, gentlemen, in the back there? Day. Nice to meet you. Were you born this tall?
No.
What happened?
I
You grew. So here's a multiple choice question. How does the body grow? It's going to be hard. I'm telling you. Just pay attention real quick. It's
Slowly.
multiple choice.
Oh, sorry.
It grows just like a balloon. It's the same thing. It just stretched and got bigger. Or B, the old cells are replaced by new cells or multiples of new cells. I'm sorry for such a hard question. Definitely a balloon. You got it right, yeah. However, I'm sure you learn in school that your old cells are replaced by new cells. And so technically speaking, if you're older than 7, you've already reincarnated. You've changed your karma. You've changed your body. So in the chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna goes to identify that the conscious entity is the soul, which gives the presence of life within the body. Just like if we were watching the Muppets, and maybe we go on the set and we see Kermit the Frog there, and then the show's over, he pulls his hand out, and I run over there and I jump over there and said, "Hey, Kermit, something's wrong with Kermit. I think he's died." I start doing CPR, get some help, or try to call the ambulance. But what actually gave that thing life was the presence of the hand. So the presence of the soul is what gives life to the body.
You guys use the word Atma?
Atma, yes. Like it could be Marilyn Monroe, but nobody wants to take the dead body of Marilyn Monroe on a date. What gave beauty to the body? When we go to the pet store, maybe they have 50% discount for the pets that are in the dumpster in the back. No, nobody wants that. They want one with the battery inside, the Atma, the soul inside. And so in the Gita, it goes into clearly define what is the self. And its understanding is that it's completely distinct from the body. So if I'm distinct from the body, then I'm in a predicament that no matter what I do for this body, I will not be satisfied because I'm not the body itself. Because if I am the body, then I could just do the carnal things of the body. Give it food, give it sex, give it comforts, and I should be happy because that's what I am. But if I'm not the body, then there must be another course of action to satisfy the self, because every individual is pleasure-seeking. You're all in this school pleasure-seeking. We all look for happiness. Some of us look through happiness through a heroine. Somebody looks through happiness through going to church. Somebody looks for happiness trying to work hard and get a stable career. But we're all looking for we want pleasure that doesn't go away, and we also want knowledge how to enjoy that pleasure. So Bhagavad Gita says that actually the self being distinct from the body can only be satisfied when it connects to the Supreme Self, when it connects to God. How many of you have ever had a plant before? So another hard question. I know these monks they're so smart with their hard questions. You have a plant, its leaves are looking down. Do you rub water on the leaves or pour water on the root?
Leaves.
You guys are... I can't get you now. I can't
top
stop you.
Top-shelf education.
So when we water the root of the tree, or when the hand feeds the stomach, if the hand could think for itself, just imagine. Now, I like this analogy because it reflects the mentality of us in this world. Just imagine your hand could think for itself, it talks to the other hand and says, why do we work so hard to feed the stomach when we could actually just enjoy on our own? Well, we don't need, we could just take that food, just enjoy it for ourselves. And so he takes, goes, we see, what's your name? Roman?
Roman.
Okay, so Roman goes to Kalachandji's restaurant, one of the best vegetarian restaurants, the best vegetarian restaurant in Dallas, but one of the best restaurants in Dallas.
Is it open?
It's, I think it's takeout limited seating.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so we see Roman at the restaurant, and his hands grew a brain. Boop, boop, they just grew a brain. They started thinking for themselves, and you see him. He's like, I can't control it. The hand starts rubbing mashed potatoes on the skin, and their hands are feeling like, actually, this is quite nice. But after a week, how do those hands feel? How does Roman feel? The hands are going on strike. They're just trying to enjoy the food for themselves. So similarly, when we're in this world, we say, I don't need God. I just need to be the object of enjoyment. I don't need to be the center of attention, but I definitely need to be the center of enjoyment. All pleasures have to be directed towards me, and I'll be satisfied. That is just like the hand rubbing mashed potatoes on his skin. It doesn't do the job. It doesn't nourish. It doesn't bring satisfaction, because the nature of the soul, its constitutional dharma. How many of you heard that word? How many know have a guess what that word means? Because it's actually very multifaceted. It doesn't have an English translation. Any ideas? Some of the meanings of dharma?
In Hindu Dharma, not Buddhist Dharma, right?
Proper living, or
That's one of the meanings. Is this like kind of duty? That's one of the meanings.
Good.
Teaching.
That's more of a Buddhist sense
Okay.
of Dharma.
One of the essential characteristics of this word is that it means essential characteristic. Like what is the dharma of fire? Hot. What's the dharma of habanero? Habanero peppers. Spicy. If you're munching like 10 of them down, that's not a habanero. It's some other pepper that looks like a habanero. That's not a habanero. So the dharma of salt, if it comes out sweet, this is not salt. It's sugar. So the dharma of the soul is to serve, and that dharma is fully realized when it's engaged in serving God with love. So the essential dharma, and you could call it religion as well, the essential eternal religion of the soul is to serve God with love. And whenever he's not doing it, he's not happy. And as closer and closer he comes to that platform of fully serving God with love, giving up other desires and just thy will be done, then he's satisfied, then he's happy. So that is called Bhagavat Dharma. Bhagavat Dharma. It's called by many words. Bhakti Yoga, another word. Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of love and devotion. Yoga is where we get the English word union, unite, yoke. The Sanskrit is, English is rooted in the Sanskrit language. Again, brudra, brother. Tumultula, tumultuous. You got all these English, not only words, but the way grammar is set up and such. So the idea is that the soul can only be satisfied when engaged. Exactly, yeah. So that leads to this topic of the depersonalization of God. How many of you have heard people say, I put my intentions out to the universe? And share some of your thoughts about that. Because oftentimes it comes with the same approach and sentiment as someone who's saying, I'm praying to God. But we don't want to use the 3-letter word God, because it's like, that's like a bad word. So I say, I put my intentions out to the universe.
To the universe.
I relate it closely when someone says like sending good energy.
Yeah.
Just energy towards.
Okay. So if we're just literally speaking of the universe, it's like I'm putting my there's some idea that there's something spiritual or something divine. So what is that divinity? So some more thoughts. What do you think about that statement? I put my, like if someone graduates from all, studying at Criswell College, and at the end they just say, I put my intention out to the universe. Would you say that they took in as much of the information and teachings that they could from Criswell College, or there's something perhaps more that could be gained?
I mean, I definitely think that it's differing worldview or philosophy than what's kind of taught at Criswell. But even like my experience talking with some people that say those type of things is more mantra-esque of, I'm repeating these things in my head, or I'm repeating these things out loud, hoping that they are either realized or it helps me realize those things.
Okay. So, from what I understand, I'm not a Christian scholar, but from what I understand, in Christianity, God is is not a non-entity.
As being.
A being.
Sure.
And so depersonalization, you find, isn't it there? You may be more familiar with me, but in certain Christian ideologies, people are moving towards seeing God less as a being. In certain churches or
Process
certain
theology.
groups.
Process theology.
Oftentimes when people get more philosophical, then they get less devotional, less loving.
Sure.
Sometimes, isn't it? So this is like the depersonalization. Let me ask you a question. How many of you believe that the sun is hot? All right. One person, only one
The
person.
sun.
The sun, like in the sky. Yeah. not like
S-U-N.
S-U-N, yes. Why do you believe the sun is hot?
Because we can feel warmth from it.
All right, that's a great answer. Everybody else, same answer? Yeah. And so the logic is called, in Sanskrit, Satkaryavad, which means you know something about the cause, and that leads you to understand something about, or you know something about the effect, sorry, but it leads you to understand something about the cause. Now, with the sunlight, we see shadows. Would we conclude that shadows exist on the sun?
There are dark spots on the sun.
Yeah, but no shadows.
No shadows.
It's made of fire.
It's just less brilliant, more brilliant,
Mm-hmm.
but not
Depends
necessarily.
on how you understand shadow. I mean, because there are dark spots on the sun, so technically on the surface of the sun, that are, in some sense, hiding the light.
Hiding light.
It's
But
less.
not-
It's less.
It's not like pitch black. Like,
Right. No, of course not. No.
So it's lights there.
Less intense. I
Less
guess.
intense. Okay. So I like the sun and light example because it brings out a lot of things. If God is the source of everything, again, God must be a person. If I have intelligence, then my source must have the most intelligence. If I have wealth, then my source must have all the wealth. In fact, he owns all the planets. I got my iPhone, or I got my credit card. Is that wealth or much more of a debt?
Yeah.
If I have strength, then God must be the most strong. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Being the source. If I have beauty, then God must be the most beautiful. If I have beauty, wealth,
Strength, knowledge,
No.
power.
Fame. If you think of all of the different things that could cause someone to be attractive to another, the name Krishna means the all attractive. That being who possesses all attractive qualities. So one thing we would like to discuss is that God actually has not just a divine intelligence, not just a divine strength, but he has a divine form. That man is made in the image of God. That he has a form, human-like, but it's not made out of blood, pus, and decaying flesh that's going through the constant cellular changes. It's eternal. Now, someone may argue that you are anthropomorphizing God. And they will conclude God must be non-entity, just an energy. Because, this is an anthropomorphized conclusion. Now, what's wrong with that argument?
The argument that, say it again?
If
we use anthropomorphic kind of descriptions of God.
That if God must be more of like an energy, not an entity. Because that's just your anthropomorphizing God.
Right.
What is wrong with that argument? How would you deal with that argument?
From a Hindu perspective, or
Just from a philosophical perspective. You don't even have to believe in the argument that you're going to give, but just what kind of hole would you see there?
Well, I mean, you're asserting that what they're saying is you're taking creation and turning creation to describe God. You're saying, no, we're looking at God first, and everything that comes from that is a reflection of who he is. So it's two different viewpoints.
Two different directions
Yeah.
going? Okay, yeah. One argument, well, particularly one thing that you could argue again is the conclusion. It says, God is not an entity. That the conclusion, it's based, you haven't actually built a foundation for your conclusion. Here's an example. Somebody loves potatoes and they're from Idaho. They say, people from Japan love potatoes. Another person says, no, you're potato-morphizing Japanese people. People from Japan hate potatoes. Both conclusions are coming from, a particular box of human conditioning. How do you know what happens in Japan? Only the way you know is from information from Japan comes this way. You can't stand on your roof with a telescope and learn something about Japan unless you're a flat earther and you got a good telescope.
So revelation.
It has to come from a divine source. Otherwise, you're working in the box. If your conclusion is created by the human brain, then so these arguments are that ultimately we can't. God is translogical. He's above. He's not illogical. He's not below the platform of logic, but he's translogical, meaning he is. It's not that he misses the mark, but his existence is above the mark. So you have two paradoxical aspects of God. Is the sunlight the sun? And the question again, is the sunlight the sun? It is. And it's not. It's both at the same time. It's the power and the powerhouse, the energetic and the energy. You can't completely you can't put one in a box and not have the other. But you can also, there is vishesha or distinction. There is a distinction. And there is a unity. What do they have in common? Sunlight and the sun itself. Luminosity and heat. But they're still distinct. So similarly, the soul and God, there's a unity and there's a distinctness. The soul and God are eternal, and from our understanding, both are unborn and both do not die. And the soul and God are spiritual. except for the ray of sunshine is just like a tiny little spark, and the sun is just fully potent. So the soul is just like a tiny spark out of the fire. It doesn't create a new fire. It's just, that's what it is, eternally just a tiny spark. And perhaps you heard of the term eminence
Closeness,
and transcendence,
distance.
which are polar opposites. Eminence is, in philosophical terms, when something is a part of something so much that it does not have its own existence. So when someone says, I put my intentions out to the universe, sometimes it's a spiritual or a religious philosophy that God is just everything. It is just an energy. There's no, sometimes in the yoga communities, you probably might be familiar, somebody says, like, I am you, you're me, it's all one. So that's a concept of eminence. And then the concept of duality is oil and water. Complete distinction. No relation, actually, even. Because there is no connection. Because they're distinct from each other. And what the ancient Vedas argue is that God is both. This world is God's energy, and thus is emanating from him, and therefore, in a sense, this is a part of God. But it's also, God has his own independent existence from this world. Does that make sense? That God is not, this is like just like the sunlight coming from the sun, it's part of the sun itself. Like, where does it start? Where does it stop? Is it just the flames, or where is the demarcation on? So this chair is the energy of God, but it's not necessarily it's not God in the being aspect. This is just this energy.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, yeah.
Not
I was
necessarily
going to go
related
for questions
to it.
right now, yeah.
So, in terms of like just the teachings and then the extent to which historicity matters, for instance, like Krishna or Hindus talk about the antiquity of the Vedas. Scholars who study languages like Sanskrit and Prakrit and things like that have shown that it may not be as ancient as it seems, because there aren't a lot of precursors prior to 1,500 years. Does that matter for you guys, or is it
definitely,
just the teachings?
definitely does matter. The first scholars who studied Indian literature were kind of hard pressed to even accept anything beyond. Well, when the British came to India, they at that time believed that the planet was 6,000 years old. And then you have these Indian scriptures talking about thousands, saying that the earth is millions of years old and the universe is billions of years old. That did not make any sense to them whatsoever. And so getting a proper scholastic approach towards Indian literature, it's taking a lot of time, because there's a lot of cultural
bias.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
So here's some evidences for the antiquity. For example, there is a river called Sarasvati, which is described in the ancient Vedas.
Mm-hmm.
And the exact route and cities, and some of those cities are still present today.
Mm-hmm.
So the mountainous regions route and all the way to where it comes out to the ocean. That's described. That river is not present in India at all. NASA, using satellite technology, discovered a river that was larger than the Ganges, that was flowing. And from their study, from their analysis, they said this river dried up 2,500 years ago. And whoever wrote a picture had to write about it around 3,000 years ago, because it's like You can't write about something existed 3,000 years ago, and you didn't. How would you know unless you were there? So it's written in such a way. That's one thing. Another thing is there are astrological descriptions. They're basically a clock. So in the Mahabharata, which is the ancient battle between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, there are certain astrological descriptions. It'll say the moon is in Taurus, and then 5 days later there was an eclipse, and then 3 days later there was a solar eclipse. So when you get one astronomical event, it'll point to, say, 3 dates in the past 100,000 years. And then you combine that with a second astronomical event, and that just points to one date. And then you get a third or fourth astronomical event, and they're all just pointing for the same dates.
So it does sound like historicity and questions like that matter.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, because that's important. I mean, Sanskrit, what I understand is it's kind of a religious language.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily actually the spoken language.
There's like different levels of, there's like kind of the scholastic sense, like
Right.
it was a language, it was a norm,
Okay.
but there it's also
Yeah, it's definitely a language, obviously.
it was like in India there are villages that speak Sanskrit, but it's more of a revival.
Okay, okay.
But there are levels of like Sanskrit writing that are a layman would not be able to write. It would be
Sure.
more of a scholar or a priest would be able
Just
to.
what I understand, and I'm not a scholar in Hinduism necessarily, but what I've read in religious studies, that Prakrit, the more spoken colloquial language, vernacular of certain periods of time, inscriptions were abundant and writing was everywhere, and then it's so it's in the first 500 years CE, so to speak,
Yeah.
where you start to see Sanskrit become more common. And so that's as far back as generally as people can go. Now the descriptions, maybe it's preserving something that's more ancient. Maybe it was preserved in an oral tradition or something.
Yeah, a lot of the books were understood to be put in transcription.
Uh-huh.
Maybe 3,000 years ago, but there are evidence of the existence like this astronomical or the existence of this ancient river and such.
That's helpful. You guys, don't let me dominate because I got lots of questions. I took notes. You guys want to jump in, or if you have something else?
Yeah. So, first of all, super awesome to see that. I mean, Christianity is super philosophical, coming out of Greek philosophy. A lot of tackling alongside that. So it's nice to see. Also super philosophical and ancient too. Like not everybody is necessarily studying that. Can you describe kind of God, everything else, creation is kind of an emanation from Him. So if God is eternal, would you say that the universe also is eternal?
That's a good question. So in the ancient Vedic conception, the universe is something that is there. First of all, we're in one of the billions and billions of universes.
Okay.
And these universes go through cycles of creation and destruction. This is chapter 7, I think. Or chapter 9. Hold on, chapter 9. I have it kind of memorized, but I still need a refresher. Yata kashtastato nityam vair sarvata go mahantata sarvani bhutani matstani upadhaya. Understand, as the mighty wind blows everywhere, but rest in the sky, all created beings rest in me. Sarvaks bhutani kunteya praktiyanti mamikam kapakshaya panastani kapalo vishajamiham. At the end of the millennium, now that just doesn't mean 1,000 years, but like the end of creation, all material manifestations enter into my nature. And the beginning of the another millennium, by my potency, I create them again. And then he says, Prakatim shramavashtabhya vishajami punapana bhutagramamidam kritsnam avasham prakatir vashat. The whole cosmic order is under me. Under my will, it's manifested again and again. And under my will, it's annihilated at the end. And then I'll just read one more, because these are all so... all this work cannot bind me, meaning I'm not, although I am making this happen, I'm not an ordinary worker like if I invest in a business, I start a business, I'm kind of like, I'm pulled into it. I'm becoming, like if God is not made like material or pulled into material activities by this act of creation, destruction. I'm detached from all these material activities, seated as if neutral. Oh, no, just one more. The material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, producing moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created again and again.
Is there, just to jump in, the cycles of creation and destruction, so to speak?
So
Are they endless or?
Yeah, it's endless.
Okay.
So this universe is said to be on its half lifespan. It's 311 trillion, 40 billion years is the lifespan of this universe. And we've gone through half of it, so it's about 150 trillion years old. That's not a scientific thing, that's just a scriptural understanding.
So,
And then,
follow-up question. One of the major critiques that I know of, specifically tackling like eternality of the universe, eternality of God, is if you're tracing back endless creation, we never get to a point where we exist today. Have you heard or
oh
considered?
yeah. No, the like modern age and stuff.
Sure.
Oh yeah, that's happened many times, billions of times.
Well, what I'm saying is, like, for example, there's a focal point that we live in right now, 2021.
Yeah.
If there's eternal creation before us and then eternal recreation after us, how do we ever get to this point where we're at now?
It's just like winters, spring, summer, fall, winter. It's just a.
Right, but there's no point in origin. It just
Oh no, there's
continually
a like winter. You could say is like the destruction.
Okay.
Spring is the creation. So there is a like if we were to smash this clay drum and it turns back into dirt, and that drum does not exist anymore.
True.
But then the clay, we could make it, take that clay, mix it with water, fire it up again, and make another drum.
So what
So
I'm
the-
saying, the 1,000th drum that was recreated.
Yeah.
But we understand that there's been millions and trillions and billions of drums recreated before us. How do we ever get to the 1,000th drum?
I'm not sure I'm following.
Like, what's the ontological status of an individual?
Oh, it doesn't.
Drum
It doesn't really
or-
exist actually.
Okay.
Krishna
Yeah.
says in that.
So Maya.
It's Maya. It's an illusion. Krishna says, "Nasate vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sata." The sages have studied and concluded the material energy. There is no true existence
Okay.
because it doesn't stick around. Like, if I could give you, $100,000 in your hand for 100,000ths of a second and take it back, you didn't really have any access to it.
Sure.
You didn't get to do anything. So the material world is considered God's real energy. It's not false, but it's temporary, and thus it's in a sense an illusion or unreal in the sense that it doesn't stick around at all. Where the soul and God are eternal. So it's like we're looking for love in all the wrong places. We're eternal, and we're chasing after the temporary, the carrot on the stick, hoping that it's going to give us satisfaction. But it's a bad marriage. The eternal chasing after the temporary is just destined to be dissatisfied.
You said we, Atma, does it exist in other life forms? I assume it does.
Absolutely,
Like
yeah.
dogs and
Yeah.
bacteria.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, but that's eternal as well. So the
Yeah.
Atma in bacteria, for instance,
Yeah.
is eternal.
I know any of you had a pet, you know that your pet, it's a real thing. It's not like if I were to take the legs off this chair and we take the legs off your puppy, something in your heart would say, no, this was fine, but the other one that's something wrong there. You're actually causing pain to a real thing, a real being. So what gives beingness is the presence of the soul.
But also Maya, correct? Or that also has to factor in.
Well, Maya is what causes us to misidentify that as the self. The body as the self.
So, okay.
So the like if I hold on to a red hot iron, I experience pain because of my holding on to it. So we're holding on to material conceptions and we suffer to that relationship. Like, how many of you have had your car smashed? How many of you, and do you feel some discomfort, anxiety about it? Like, for example, when my mother, years ago, she was working at Airborne Express, just blue-collar work, bringing the packages to your door. And she saved up money, got a BMW, like almost new BMW. And when she first got it, she was afraid, like, oh man, I want someone to scratch it. And now, what if someone actually did scratch it? She would literally feel this anxious pain connected to it. Like, you hit me, you'd say. Because of that identification. Now she drives past a junkyard and there's a smashed up BMW, doesn't feel anything. So due to holding on to that identification, there's that pain that comes. So you've seen examples of great saints in different religions throughout history who don't experience the world in the same suffering manner that everybody else does, because they're not invested in the temporary body as the self. They're invested themselves as soul servants of God. And this body is just this is his property. This is just a rent-a-car. I don't trash it because it's not my property, but I don't try to use it to exploit it thinking that this is a source of enjoyment. Yes?
Okay, so can you help me to grasp Maya, because it's a little bit confusing how I believe that you made it kind of, what I heard was that we basically, everything, we don't truly like exist, if that makes sense. So then how exactly like can that be true if there's also like reincarnation and enlightenment and everything?
No, we exist. Maya is the energy of God that causes us to misidentify with matter as the self.
Okay.
Maya is a facility, because love is not something you can force upon somebody.
Okay.
So God has created our understanding. There's a story. There's 3 stories in the Bible that, for us, is actually a good illustration of how the soul ended up in this world. Story of Adam and Eve, story of Lucifer, story of the prodigal son. All 3 stories, they started off living in a nicer place, and they moved to a not as nice place. 2 of the stories had the element of jealousy. 1 story had the element of kind of independence issues, like the prodigal son. So the Vedic perspective is that souls exist in the spiritual world. But if a soul has the wayward desire to enjoy separately from God, God facilitates that soul to enjoy separately. The material world is where everyone is trying to have their own God project to enjoy separately. Try to be God in try to be God instead of serve God. like the hand. Like everybody we find, not just for people out there, for all of us, we're thinking, how can it's all about my enjoyment. And we're trying to, with our spirituality, with our religious approach, we're trying to curtail that desire that actually doesn't actually satisfy the soul. So Maya is kind of an illusion. Maya means illusion. It causes us to misidentify with the temporary material body as a self, so we can forget about God and just chase after the carrots in this world. But when we're here, eventually the soul becomes dissatisfied because it's not its real nature. What is the dharma of the soul? What's the eternal characteristic of the soul? Essential characteristic?
Service for God, yes.
Service for God. So that eventually bubbles up where the soul says, I've tried everything. I tried indulgence, I've tried comforts, I've tried everything. And that soul eventually turns back to God. And the curtain or the covering of Maya is gradually released or taken away.
To make sure I understand it correctly, you would say that Maya is anything that's registered as physical. Everything else spiritual is the true existence. Is that correct?
So Maya is
or just the association?
The misidentification.
Okay. Not necessarily like this table isn't real, but me choosing to.
Yeah. So the table is real.
Okay.
There is another philosophical group in India called Advaitavada, and they would say everything is false.
Mm-hmm.
But Bhagavad Gita says, no, this is it's God's energy. It can't be unreal,
Okay.
but it's false in the sense that it has no permanence.
Okay.
In connection, like if you were to speed up time and you're existing and all these things are going away, coming and going away, then it really doesn't have much reality to it. So it is real because it's God's energy. So it can't be reduced to being non-existent.
Would you agree with the kind of statement that the human predicament, right? The human predicament is Maya in some sense.
Yeah.
The main thing that humans wrestle with or struggle against is Maya. Is that?
Well, Maya is a kind of a result of our rebelliousness towards God.
Okay, so rebellion.
So you can't fight Maya. You can just go to God, and then Maya will back off.
Okay.
You try to, battle the illusion. It's like it's just a perfectly made matrix. You're not going to get out of it without God's help.
Two thoughts. Feel free to jump in. Just one, in all of the creation destruction kind of cycles, is this a constant issue within each creation destruction cycle for humans, or I assume humans exist in all of these various.
Yeah. There's seasonal characteristics.
Okay.
So how many of you believe that Adam and Eve lived longer than people today? In the Vedas, it would say that they actually lived in a previous age. That comes into the concept of why books were written. From the Hindu or Vedic perspective, books came into existence because not only human lifespans drastically reduced 10 times, but humans' memories drastically reduced 10 times. So the average human had no problem remembering clearly volumes and volumes of scriptural or just knowledge that was available without having it written down. And so these things had to be written down at that time. So that time is supposed to be around 5,000 years ago. That's when the shift of the age took place. And so that's when the lifespans became now, like, instead of 1,000 years max, 100 years, around approximately 100 years max. And that's when books started to come, not because the humans were getting smarter, but they're getting slower.
Interesting. this statement is something from some literature that we read. Wisdom does not live in two rooms. Knowledge divided invites shadows into the soul. And I was just wondering this is the first time you've seen it, sorry to put you on the spot. But I'm just wondering your reflections on this type of idea.
Okay, I would have to think about
You
that.
have to think about it and meditate on it maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
But, wisdom does not live in two rooms.
What is that quote from, I think it's, who's the great American author? It's got the word hobgoblin. It says, a fool's consistency is the hobgoblins of small minds.
Hobgoblin, yes.
Who's that? Who writes that? Fool's consistency of the, who's the famous American writer who, just think of...
Somebody Google it.
Oh,
That's
God.
our brain now, right?
Yeah, see? If you look at language defies evolution. It goes the other way. Our language get dumber. And if you look at Sanskrit, they're just more wholly consistent and intelligent languages. And Sanskrit has been considered the top. It's the most linguistically consistent, and they say it's great for a
Did you
computer.
find it?
Ralph Waldo Emerson.
There you go,
Yes.
Emerson.
Do you have the quote there?
I think Roman said that he found it too, right?
Did you find the quote?
Maybe? No?
No.
I heard Emerson from somewhere over
The
there.
foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen, philosophers, and divines.
That's rich. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a little more to it also, but it's basically a sage can hold opposing ideas in the same.
To
Like-
what extent, though? So
Like the
tension between two ideas. Or
Yeah,
something that?
like God being present in this world and God being distinct
Sure.
and having his
Sure.
own individual existence,
Sure.
separate and not even dependent from this world. No.
But still knowable.
Yeah.
Still, to what extent is the Atma of God distinct from the Atma of all other beings?
So God doesn't have God is called Paramatma, the super soul.
Okay.
Now, how I have a physical body, but that is like a covering. Like if I put a latex glove over my hand, that's compared to the covering of the subtle body, the mental or astral body that's composed of three elements: mind, intelligence, and ego. And then if I put a boxing glove over that, that's compared to the physical body, which it's solids, liquids, gas, radiant energy, and space: earth, water, fire, air, ether. So if I take off that boxing glove and put on a different glove, that's like what death is. You leave your physical body, but you're still carrying that mental conceptions, that same kind of mind to your next life. Like Mozart, he was able to compose symphonies at the age of 4. He was obviously, our perspective, carrying this interest in music from it and from his past life coming into his next life. So so there's a distinction between the body and the mental body and then the self. Like Platonic dualism is distinct from Vedic dualism. Platonic is the body and the mind, where the Vedic is body, mind, and then there's you, the self, underneath all of that. But the self has its own mind and body. Just like the glove has fingers. Why? Because the hand underneath has fingers. The glove has, it's fit to shape. So just like my body can see, because my soul has its own spiritual senses. Hearing, touch, taste, has its own form eternally. But it's like atomized right
And
now.
what's the relation of all that to
But God,
the super being of
yeah,
God?
so the super being of God. So he is just like that. He has his own form. It's not like he has a body. His body is him.
Okay.
He doesn't have like a person getting in a vehicle and then he has this material vehicle. God's body is wholly spiritual. And our body is wholly spiritual in the spiritual world. So the distinction is that he is the all beautiful, all attractive, all powerful, all knowing.
The
So
supreme rather than
yeah,
an emanation.
yeah.
And
But the souls in the spiritual world are like, if you go to the spiritual world, I was just reading this book called Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And this Gopal, he's there. He's gone to the kingdom of God. And he sees this being. And it is like the being is so magnificent, as if like universes are coming out of him. He's just so powerful. And he says, "Oh my God, oh Lord, I'm so happy to see you." And he's actually, "No, I'm just one of the regular souls here." You gotta, and then you would see somebody even more like amazing. And they're like, no, I'm just a soul. God's over there. And so the soul is quite glorious itself, but God is infinitely more glorious.
and he's, in some sense, not to use, to use anthropomorphic language, obviously.
We would say that
Yeah,
God is a person.
persistent and or
Yeah.
in some sense static throughout all the creation destruction kind of cycles. The same.
Is God the same?
Yes.
He's eternally a person. He doesn't become a person. Like he's not like
It's not in the reincarnation, obviously,
He-
cycle.
he has. It says he can appear in unlimited forms, just like the unlimited ripples in the ocean. So he has his.
Manifestation.
So he has his original form, but he can appear as a burning bush. And that burning bush, some of those forms are actually eternal. Like he'll again come in like, just like, say, name a band. Give me a band. I'm just thinking like the Beatles, but my brain, that's too old.
The Beatles worked.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're
Everybody
playing.
knows the Beatles.
They're playing in Dallas, then they're playing in Houston, then they're playing in San Antonio. It's like that.
Right.
So God may appear in this universe, and then you say, "Oh, he's no longer here," but he's in another universe. It's just like the sun's always setting. He's always got his road show going on. So he may incarnate as a burning bush right now in some other universe, but when it was like thousands of years ago on this earth.
Do the rules that we live by in this world, are they the same for our physical existence in this life as they are for our spiritual existence, or what is the relationship between the two?
This is similar, but it's like a perverted or corrupted reflection of the spiritual world.
Okay.
So I'm sure you've heard descriptions like the lamb and the lion lie together. So in the spiritual world, there's no sense of exploiting another or taking from another. It's just a sense of giving. It's the concept of the pure soul. Like this white light, if we were to hold a prism to it, it would show so many different colors. Now if we color that light with blue paint, then what color comes out? Blue. So all the other colors are being held back by the paint. It's holding it back. And so the soul is itself, it's pure, but right now we are conditioned, we are covered over, and so our personalities, how many of you have ever done something you're not proud of? But those aspects are not part of your true self. Those are coverings. So by reawakening your love for God, those layers can be peeled off and the true light of the soul can shine through.
I was just going to say, why does God, why don't we ever, we bacteria, atma, why don't souls attain kind of that liberation or that moksha or whatever we want to call it, and stay there permanently?
Oh, we stay there.
Stay there
Yeah,
permanently?
Krishna says, and throughout the Gita, he says, once you come here, you don't come back.
But there have been billions and billions. It's an eternal cycle. So getting there presumes that an end,
Yeah. So the soul.
finality.
So this is kind of going beyond human comprehension.
Right.
But there's unlimited souls. There's not a. It's like unlimited.
Why does the supreme being then need this in some sense? What purpose is all this serving?
It's for the purpose of loving reciprocation.
Okay.
So the soul's nature is to love God, and God is his nature is to love back. What's the word? Like, for example, you may do something for me, and I might remember.
Sure.
I might not remember. I might be kind of, one term is miserly in my, like, not really appreciate.
Sure.
But God is, and you see some people that are like that. They don't really care when you do something for them. They're just, we would say, miserly in the way they treat people.
So it sounds like
But-
the supreme Atma, in some sense,
But God is the
wants and
opposite.
desires and needs, is in need of constant affirmation from other soul beings.
It's not. It's
I mean,
not
that's-
affirmation. It's
tell me if
more.
I'm
of-
reading it wrong.
Yeah, it's more of giving love.
Okay.
Yeah, like there's a verse. This is not even a verse about God, but it's a verse about liberated souls. Souls, because they're different in the Vedas. It describes there are different approaches to God, and some people may approach the impersonal side of God, which is not necessarily our path, but they may just like detach themselves from all material enjoyment and just try to merge into the light of God. And they don't have a relationship, they don't have love or anything like that.
Right.
So this verse says, Atmaramash Chamunayo, that even a soul that has no material desires and needs nothing and is basking in the spiritual pleasure of the awareness of the divinity of this, the unity of the self, basically understanding himself as a soul and not have any of the anxieties of this world. Even a soul like that, he desires to become a loving servant of God once he gets access to it, once he comes, gets introduced to it, because it's a higher sense of pleasure. That the highest sense of pleasure is that loving reciprocal relationship. And so God is, in a sense, wanting to serve you.
Yes.
Like you may do a tiny little service, and he feels indebted that he wants to reciprocate with you with great love. I think there's a statement in the Corinthians in relation to that.
I know we're coming up, needing to hit a break. Another Hindu friend of mine from the temple up in Frisco, the big one, the Hanuman temple. We had him in a Zoom earlier this semester, and so if I could, I want to pose the question that you posed to him towards the end of our conversation, which was, he affirmed in some sense kind of pluralism, so the validity of all different paths at some level, and in some sense the validity of cultures and the ethical systems of various cultures. And the question was asked, well, it's so affirming, what about like cannibalism? That was the question that was asked.
That's a good
He said, well, in some sense, he would not critique or want to change or stop anybody from engaging in cannibalism.
Oh, we would tell him, don't eat the people, though.
Yeah.
Don't eat people.
Okay, thank you.
We're super strict here. We're super
That was a
strict.
little bit-
We're monks. And, we got,
That was disturbing. It was a pluralism without boundaries,
yes. I
without, in some
understand.
sense, right and wrong.
Yeah.
And so I do hear some right and wrong kind of boundaries in some sense. In what
Yeah,
you're saying.
basically the understanding is that the highest standard is pure devotion to God. The application of that principle can be applied in every religious tradition. Like here, I ask people this question sometimes. Like someone says, "I love God."
Yeah.
What's wrong with that picture? And
Was that smoking a weed? Is that what that's
weed or
okay.
cigarette or anything? Yeah.
Okay.
What is wrong with that picture?
They love God, right? And they love God. We were talking about earlier. This is not our own, so you're in a sense corrupting that.
Okay, that was the answer I was expecting. I want something more. No, thank you though.
I mean, you're choosing to disassociate with reality at some point. I mean, marijuana a little bit more than cigarettes, but same thing, heroin, cocaine, anything.
I'll give it a little analogy. Say we are all on The Walking Dead, not the cast, but we're in the situation. Zombie apocalypse. There's nothing to eat. We haven't eaten in 15 days, and we find some food in the dumpster at 7-Eleven. How do you feel?
Better with the food that we have.
So you haven't eaten 15 days, so you find some food in the dumpster. You're totally elated. Now, Bali comes around the corner. He says, "Hey, man, I got some of Krishna Mangala's pizza. It's got Kalamata olives. It's got fresh mozzarella. And it's got this sauce that's been passed down for generations. The crust is really perfect. It's got fresh basil. It's got the crushed red chilies on it. And it's piping hot. I've got 20 pies. Each one has got, like 14 slices or, 12 slices each. You can have as much as you want. You're eating now your 8th slice. Do you still have a pulling to go back to that dumpster? So if you're enjoying on this level, then you lost your taste for that level, this bottom level. If you're truly tasting the pizza, unless you're just like, mad and you're imagining that you're eating some pizza, but you don't have any interest in this because you're tasting the pizza. So if somebody is actually experiencing God in a relationship, then there should be some byproducts there. There should be some results that are seen, and they're not chasing after the hedonistic pleasures of this world. They're not chasing after the flesh of an animal. We consider that hedonistic, that to cause other pain just for the pleasure of our tongue. In a state of like maybe The Walking Dead or something, if you're in an emergency state, that some rules of religion can be there's rules, going against the rules, following the rules, and then in emergency situations where things
Suspended.
But if it's just for the pleasure of a tongue, to harm another being that there's a real, you have a puppy, it would hurt the puppy. To harm another being just for carnal pleasures is considered immoral. So, we have this principle, no eating animals. We have no intoxication, because as you said, it's a distraction. And
Caffeine as well, correct?
caffeine, cigarettes. That's a small one, but
Sure.
but yeah, we don't do. Most of us who are taking vows, we don't take caffeine also. But it's because it can be quite distracting, and the end result should be that if you're actually tasting this relationship, then those things should be, the desire to do those things should go away anyway. No adultery, like many are, not many, but there's a certain section of society that are monks. But if there is this desire for sexual enjoyment, then God has a license for that called marriage. Outside of that means you're going to create all kinds of trouble in society. You're going to pains and all kinds of trouble. Babies are killed. We have families split apart just because a person can't control their genitals.
Would you guys be against abortion, it sounds like?
Absolutely, yeah, because the soul is there.
Yeah, exactly.
If the soul, the soul is, the semen is alive because of the presence of the soul. And then, when that's all directed by God. And sometimes you find somebody who is vegan, but they're pro-abortion, and we're like, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense, Or someone who's anti-abortion, but
pro capital punishment.
pro-animal slaughter.
Yeah.
How does it make sense?
So,
And wait,
sorry.
no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling.
Mhm.
That's another one. And these are actually, just like the chair here is standing on 4 legs, they're considered 4 pillars of religiosity. Compassion, or mercy, honesty, self-control, and what's the last one?
Right conduct.
So compassion is related to not killing for our own pleasure.
Work.
This compassion. This honesty is related to don't gamble. Just work an honest job and trust that God's going to give you what you deserve. Apply your skills to life and just have this faith that you're going to get what you deserve. Intoxications, cleanliness, purity of the mind and body. And what was the last one? Self-control, austerity. So, in our society, generally in our modern society, we're standing on one leg. The only thing that people really kind of get a little irked about is if you lie. But if you're not clean mentally, oh yeah, we all go out and make our minds unclean. If you don't have compassion for other entities, no, we all do that. If we sleep around and we're not self-controlled, no, it's acceptable. But it's a little bit, just one leg. So it describes the 4 ages. We're in the last age, the age of quarrel, hypocrisy, where only one leg of religion still has some sentiment in people's minds. So it says in this difficult age, the easiest thing we can do is just sing the names of God. That's instead of
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna or Jehovah or Allah or Christ or,
Interesting. Did you have a final question?
I've got tons of questions.
Yeah. We can do this all day long.
This
is great.
Thank you. We enjoy the dialogue, and thank you very much for having us
You
come.
want to ask one more?
Sure.
Oh, go ahead.
So, just relating functionally to y'all's worship and typical religious practices, can you define kind of what Hare Krishna means? Is it Sanskrit? What's the purpose? Why do you repeat it so often?
Okay, yeah. Hare is addressing the feminine side of God, the energy of God. Krishna is addressing the energetic, the kind of power in the powerhouse. It's a term for the divine or God. Ladies must come from God, so God must have the female femininity must come from God. It's not just a masculine thing. And the prayer is, the chant is asking the Lord, O energy of the Lord, O all attractive one, Krishna, O Rama, the source of pleasure and the reservoir of pleasure, or the supreme enjoyer, meaning everything is meant for you, please engage me in your loving service. Please give me something to do for you. So it's a prayer of, we try to refine our kind of prayer. You might have done this before. A lot of times you notice people praying to God that He's the ATM. Give me this, give me that. He's like a Amazon Prime. just give me everything. I promise I'll put $1 in the donation box or something. But we try to reverse that mood. Sometimes a person may feel need, but then they may preface it, "Oh Lord, if you so desire." I feel like I really need help with this right now, but if you so desire. And if someone approaches with that sincere devotion, oftentimes, like there was a story of the prince and the pole star. He was a young boy who his father was a king with 2 wives, not advised. And his mother was not as favored as the other lady. She was really beautiful, and the king was just completely engrossed in her. And so he came to sit on his father's lap. He's sitting on the throne, and she pushed him off and said, if you want to sit on the throne, he just wanted to sit on his father's lap, but if you want to sit on the throne, You have to take birth in my womb. And he was just like he was just a little boy. But he was just on fire. He was so angry. He's got this royal blood, so he's just like very passionate. And he went to his mother and told her the whole story. And she said, "Yes, we're in a hard situation. The only person who can help you is God." He said, "Where can I find him?" She said, "I heard the yogis, the meditators, they find him in the forest." So this kid, he's literally just like an elementary student. He runs away from home and goes straight to the forest. And there's a great saint named Narada he's just like driven from within the heart. God gives him like direction. So he just knew that this boy's going to be there. So he shows up and he says, "Hey man, you should just go home. Don't take it so seriously." He said, "Hey, you gonna help?" The kid said, "You gonna help me, or otherwise you go home. Leave me, get out of my way." He said, "I want to find God. How do I find him?" And he was kind of testing his resolve, and he said, "Okay, this guy's very serious about it." And so this was remember we said there's the 4 ages? There were different methods that were in each age, like different prescriptions. Just like if you go to a pharmacist, they're going to give you medicine that's suitable to your situation. So he was in that previous age where people lived a very long time and had capabilities that are considered impossible today. Like National Geographic, they went to India and the Himalayas, and they would look at these yogis that would have like powers that ordinary people can't do, like this sleeping in the snow, walking around barefoot in the Himalayas all year long. And some yogi guy chewing on glass in front of them and doing all kinds of weird, crazy stuff. So this boy,
Dr.
he was
Strange kind of stuff.
What?
Dr. Strange.
Dr. Strange kind of stuff. Yeah, just like they're up there in the mountains.
Yeah.
So the yogi, the boy, they taught him, okay, just stand like this, and just sit and meditate on the Lord within the heart. So it's described that God accompanies the soul in our heart. The soul's not in the brain, it's right here. You point to yourself, where do you point? Right here. That's where you reside. So the soul is, sometimes you get some advice in your heart. And you're like, nah. And sometimes you get like, maybe you should apologize to your friend. That was kind of a jerk move. You're like, no. And then you say, okay, I'm not going to give you advice for a while. But he's always there, the Lord in the heart. These in the cartoons, the angel and the Maya and the angel and God himself. And he started meditating like that. First, he lived on dry leaves every few days. He would just pick up a leaf and eat a leaf. Then he lived on regular leaves and dry leaves. Then he lived on air. No food for weeks. Then he stopped breathing in meditation. This is not modern times. I'm sure you have biblical stories that people would not believe also. So, and at that point, all the angels came and said, hey, he's doing he's interfering with the universal process of breathing, and we're all feeling suffocation. They went to pray to God. Can you come and see what this boy wants? And the boy had intention. I want a kingdom greater than my grandfather, because he was pushed off the throne. Now his grandfather was one of the first humans in existence, and he had his own planet, kind of like Adam. And the Lord appeared, and immediately that boy, not immediately, but in the process, but by the time the Lord appeared, he was like, I was chasing after broken pieces of glass. And now I have the real gem. I don't want any of that stuff anymore. All I want is you. I just want to serve you. He said, okay, well, I'm still going to give you a planet, but... And that planet is said to be our pole star. That's the story of the Prince and the pole star. But even though a person may approach with some kind of material desires, but if it's sincerely, if this process of trying to serve with love, it can cleanse that desire where the person becomes more, thy will be done. We don't start off that way. We don't walk into Criswell College and say, the only thing I'm reasoning here is just for God. No, we got so many different things in our side bag as well. Maybe some respect, some honor, some, I don't know. So it can be really sharp. It's different things. We all have different our own motivations. But when we serve God, those motivations become more and more cleansed and purified. And that's kind of how we can test where we are at in our spiritual life. How close are we going to God? And from Bhagavad Gita's perspective, if we're not fully close, then we got to go around again. We got to take birth again, because the ticket isn't necessarily joining a religion, but actually becoming 100% sold out to God.
Sorry, I know you guys need a break. This is the last question.
Yes.
I promise.
Oh, no.
Ish. So,
We don't have a time limit.
in some forms of Hinduism, there's a turn inward, and self-deification, in some sense, is the pathway towards moksha. To what extent would
So
Hare Krishna-
deification, deity?
Self-deification.
Okay, so that's more of the Advaita.
Okay.
And so that's what kind of our talk was, to refute the idea that the soul is God.
Okay.
We don't say
That's what I heard. So I was making sure that
we don't say it's that it's just completely dualistic.
Right.
That God is up there, and He really has no connection to this world.
Completely other
Yeah.
deism type of an idea,
Yeah.
right?
No, God is
Intimately
He is
connected.
both
Yeah.
independent in His own existence, but everything is part of His existence.
Okay. That's actually very similar to a biblical worldview. Yeah. Good. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great. So let's just take 5 minutes. You guys can take a quick 1 or 2 function break. Come back. I'll talk about the final exam. Okay?
All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for your invitation.
Are these, if somebody would
Yeah.
like one, is that what that's for?
Yeah.
Not the big ones though, right? Or,
Any of them. You just
wanna
any
make sure.
donation, whatever you want
Okay.
to give. Yeah. Got some books here.
do you take this as a donation?
Oh yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. That's great.
We had our friend Shakshi watching. Dr. Aaron.
My Baha'i friend, he doesn't take any donations from non-Baha'i, so I always,
Oh.
and I can't remember last time we met if I had given you guys any. That's just, it's small token of our thanks.
Enough.
So.
It's like music. If